Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sever Davis. I'm Director of Design and Challenges here at the RSA, and I also head up the RSA Student Design Awards program. It is my great pleasure to welcome you here to this evening's special event to celebrate the launch of the 2015-16 RSA Student Design Awards program. In fact, all afternoon we've been playing host to tutors and course leaders from colleges and universities all around the UK to tell them about this year's program, and I'm pleased to say many have stayed on to hear this evening's talk. For those of you who may not know, the RSA Student Design Awards is a global curriculum and competition focused on design for social change. So, just about to begin, please could I ask you to switch your mobile phones to silent, and we're filming this evening's event and streaming live over the website, so welcome to all of you joining us online, and a reminder that the hashtag is #RSA Design if you'd like to get involved in the discussion on Twitter. So, housekeeping notice is over. I'm delighted to introduce this evening's special speaker, Ben Terrett. It's really an extra special pleasure to have Ben here this evening because he is an RSA Student Design Award alumnus. He won in 1997. Since 2012, Ben has led a multidisciplinary design team in the Cabinet Office working across government on gov.uk, where highlights have included winning a Design of the Year and a D&AD Black Pencil, but I'm pretty sure he'll say that winning an RSA Student Design Award as a student was, beats that hands down, won't you, Ben? Right. For his keynote this evening, Ben will be talking about his work driving design thinking in large organizations and the vital role that design plays in transforming services and what design means in a digital world. As I mentioned, the RSA Student Design Awards encourages the next generation to think differently about how they apply design and to understand its potential to transform society for positive impact. As we'll hear, Ben is a strong believer in design as a force for social good, though not everything. I think he's going to say that as well. So we really couldn't have a more fitting speaker for this occasion. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ben Terrett.
Thank you. Last time I was in this room was 18 years ago when I won the RSA Student Design Award. So it is a real honour to be back tonight to give the keynote speech to kick off the 2015-2016 Student Design Awards. I'm going to talk about design moving from persuasion to usability. In my opinion, design has fallen into the marketing trap of persuasion, and it needs to get back to being about usability. I'm going to talk about how design at its best has the same values as the internet at its best. Some of you will think this is basically a form versus function debate, which we've heard many, many times before. But it isn't. It's different. What has changed since 1997 is that the internet has come along. And the internet has changed everything. Several was right. The Student Design Award was had a huge impact on my early career. In fact, the first job that I got after leaving university, my boss said to me, if I'm honest, all the designers we interviewed were the same, but you'd won that award. So that kind of swung it. So I would recommend any students listening to this or watching this to take part and enter the awards. Since 1997, I've done many things. Started 2 businesses. One, Newspaper Club, some of you will be familiar with. It now takes online content and prints it on demand as newspapers. It prints newspapers for designers and photography students all over the globe, actually. And was successful, and we sold that in January this year. I've worked for Wyden & Kennedy, which is an ad agency, and in the UK is most familiar for the Honda ads, and also work for Nike. I'm currently an advisor to the London Design Festival, which is on this week, and I would encourage you to visit one of the 400 events that are running all across London this week. I'm also a governor at the University of the Arts, London, and there's some University of the Arts students here in the audience, I think, so that's great. But the day job is as Director of Design at the Government Digital Service, which is in the Cabinet Office. I have been a civil servant now for 4 years, and it's been an absolute privilege to work inside government and to work as part of public service. It's time for me to move on, and I'll be leaving GDS at the end of the month. but I'd like to talk to you about some of the things I've learned driving design in an organisation that's close to 400,000 people. For those of you that don't know, the Government Digital Service is a digital team in the Cabinet Office at the heart of government, building services so good people prefer to use them. Shortly after the coalition government came to power in 2010, Frances Maude, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, asked Martha Lane Fox to write a report on government digital. She wrote a fantastic report, pulled no punches, got straight to the point, and best of all, was only a few pages long. Her report broke down into four main areas: set up GDS, set up a central team of digital experts inside government, fix publishing. So that's the majority of websites that you'll be familiar with. DirectGov, BusinessLink, departments had their own websites. Fix transactions. That's harder, and that's things like buying your car tax online, renewing your passport, transactions that we use every day with the government. And then fourth was go wholesale, and that's make sure that that approach doesn't become an innovation unit. Make sure that that approach doesn't become an outlier. Make sure that that approach becomes the norm and gets embedded across government. They look very unhappy in those pictures there. And that's because in 2010, the UK government spent more on IT than any other country in Europe, apart from Switzerland. It seems slightly odd that Switzerland would be number one until you discover that Switzerland includes CERN in their IT budget. So we moved nearly 2,000 websites, all with different branding, all with different look and feel, all with different navigation, all with different ways of conveying information. We moved those and we made just one, gov.uk. Some of you will be familiar with gov.uk, some of you won't, so here's a little video just to explain a bit more about it. And we had some success. We won some awards. We won a D&AD Black Pencil. Some of you in the room will know what that is, many of you won't. The important thing is that the D&AD don't give awards out every year. Sometimes if they don't deem the work is good enough quality, they just don't give an award. The Black Pencil is their highest award, and in the category we won it for, there hadn't been one for 13 years. The other awards on the other side is the Design of the Year. We won the Design Museum's Design of the Year, and in the year we got nominated, we were up against the Shard and Thomas Heatherwick's Cauldron. We honestly thought we had no chance of winning that with the government website, but we did, and that was great. Not everyone was pleased. The Daily Mail pointed out that we had linked to pages like housing and local services, other outrageous things. But more important than awards, last year, the Government Digital Service and digital colleagues all across government, not just gov.uk, certainly not just design, not just websites, working on transaction, working on contracts and servers, tin and metal, as we call it in the industry, working on IT stuff like that. We've saved £1.7 billion last year. That's all technology and digital colleagues all across government, working on many different projects. But more important than awards and more important than savings is that we've made things easier for users like Anne.
I'm 67 and I've done the lasting power of attorney for my mother. My mum's grasp on modern day living as it was a bit limited, so it was decided then that I would pay all the bills, sort everything out for her. 3 years ago I had a stroke, and you start thinking about your own mortality, and you start thinking about, well, if something had have happened to me, then how would Mum have coped? What would have happened? Anyway, looking on the internet, and I literally stumbled across the government site for the lasting power of attorney. Started to look at it and I thought, this is good, because you can download all the paperwork yourself, you don't need a solicitor. And the instructions that went with each section of the lasting power of attorney they were in proper people speak, not in legal jargon, so it was very easy for me to follow it. If I can do it, anybody can do it, you know. It's easy. The written instructions, you just can't go wrong. And I would say now to anybody, don't be frightened, don't worry about going to see a solicitor, do it yourself. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I did it when I did it, and my mum's really pleased. And can I say thank you? I just want to say thank you to everybody involved in doing the website, because it's given me peace of mind, and I'm sure it gives a lot of people peace of mind. And my friend now is doing that, and you've made it so simple and so easy for anybody to do. And I just hope that anybody who sees this film, please do it, and you'll feel so relieved afterwards. You know, it's great to know that the people that you care for, everything's looked after for them. Thank you.
So how did we do that? How did we achieve all that? And what role did design play in that? Well, we focused relentlessly on user needs. Right at the start of the project, we wrote 10 design principles. Anyone can look at them, the URL is there on the screen. And the first one was start with needs, and then the asterisk reveals user needs, not government needs. So what the user is trying to do, not the government process. That sounds at first like a controversial statement to make, particularly on a government website by a government team. And then shortly after we published that, Francis Maud was asked a question in the House of Commons, and he answered like this.
Ensuring that as we reform the delivery of public services, they are designed around the needs of the user, rather than has been far too often the case in the past, being designed to suit the convenience of the government.
So anyone that didn't believe that we were serious about this and the government was serious about user needs, we would play them that video. And I'm grateful to Francis for saying that in the House of Commons, where it's recorded publicly. What does that mean in a design process? What does focusing on user needs mean? And I thought I'd give you some examples of what that means in reality. This is a good example. These are some icons that we had on a very early version of the site, gov.uk. They're very beautiful, they look fantastic, we thought they added lots of colour to the site. As the Daily Mail pointed out, there aren't many pictures, it's mostly text and information. We also thought they meant something. So we thought the question mark meant this is a page that you may not know, it's an answer to a query. We thought the orange folder paper thing represented guidance, and this is some guidance you can get on the site. When we tested it, users had absolutely no idea what any of them meant at all. And in fact, the orange one that looks like a door, users thought represented a door, and often they would click on it thinking it was a way to exit the site. And it didn't. So despite the fact they look great, we just deleted them. In a very GDS way, we just deleted the icons off the site. We wrote a blog post about it saying we're getting rid of them, and that's it. Would that have been the same if we were managing a brand and we were caught up in that language of persuasion and the icons are part of our brand assets and they're really important to the brand? I don't think it would. I don't think we'd have been so brutal, and I don't think we'd have been so focused. Another very focused and successful government design project is the road signs. This year is the 50th anniversary of the road signs. Designed by Jock Kinnear and Margaret Calvert, Britain set the standards for road signs and how that system works all across the globe. It was very similar to the situation we face now. There was a huge increase in road traffic. Signs were different all across the country, and the government decided something needed to be done about this, and one system needed to be made. But when we looked into this project even more, Calvert and Kinnear designed a bespoke typeface. And we use this typeface, we use a digital version of this typeface on gov.uk. And we don't use it because of the story or because of the link to the project. We use it because it's easy to read. We use it because it consistently tested best. Of all the typefaces we tested, this one consistently tested best with our users, and it was easy to read. That should be no surprise, really, because when they designed that typeface 50 years ago, they tested it to be read at 70 miles an hour in the dark, in the rain, when you're speeding past a road sign. So it sort of figures that it would also be very legible on a website. That's how they used to test typefaces 50 years ago. They would do it on an airfield, and they would drive lorry loads of people at a sign and see how fast they could get before they read it. We do it slightly differently now, but we still test typefaces, and we use that one because, as I say, it's the most readable. That's a picture of us on the night we won the Design of the Year award, and there in the middle in the grey jumper next to me is Margaret Calvert, who worked with us on early stages of the project and was a fantastic mentor and fierce critic of the work we were doing, and was a great help. Now, lots of you in the audience will be thinking, I know what he's talking about. He's not talking about design, he's talking about UX. That's what he's going on about. Well, it's not UX. It's slightly different to UX. UX stands for user experience, but really UX has become a term on its own and is too often used as a noun. And what happens in our industry is that people have a big project, let's say it's a year long, and they say, it's okay, at the end we'll do a month of UX, and that will fix all the problems with the user experience. And it won't fix all the problems with the user experience at all, because user experience is the responsibility of everyone. So if your website or your digital project, if the problem with that is that the servers are slow, the thing that will fix that is maybe getting another contract, buying faster servers. But if the UX team aren't in control of that, they're not in control of the user experience. So we believe that user experience is the responsibility of everyone. This is interesting because in many organizations, in most large organizations today, the biggest problem is fixing the things that everyone knows are wrong and most people know how to fix, but they just can't fix because the organization is siloed and the organization is joined up. And they're often really simple things. They're not complicated problems. They don't need fancy new ideas. They're just what we call fixing the basics. Most businesses today would gain a significant advantage over their competitors if they were able to fix the basics. There are many, many examples of this. Twitter is littered with examples. This one, for example. When Verizon sent a customer 53 letters thanking them for choosing paperless billing. Or this one. The Channel 4 on-demand player, when you plug a laptop into a TV screen, gives you this message, which seems odd. Or my favourite. This person that's trying to book a seat on a plane. Would you choose that seat? I mean, you know it's not really like that, right? You know it's going to be okay, but you know, I think still you'd be nervous about selecting that seat. What if you turned up and Airlines said, actually, there are 3 seats on this side and there are 2 on that side. I thought we made that clear in the... Anyway, being able to fix these problems puts design firmly in the boardroom, to coin a popular expression. This is where designers tell you they always want to be. But in my experience, designers struggle with this. When designers get into the boardroom or get the chance to speak to the CEO, they struggle. And I've got some advice for the designers among you listening to that. A pro tip, if you like. The CEO doesn't care about fonts. If you enter the boardroom and you say, I can save you money, I can make your services easier to use, then the CEO will be all ears. And the CEO will let you choose whatever font you want. But too often designers come at it more from the approach of fonts. And again, I think the language of persuasion, rather than the language of usability and how we can make things better. If you say to the CEO, I can help fix the basics, I can help make things better, and then you deliver that, you don't just say it, you deliver it, that earns you trust. Because delivery earns you trust. And you need trust to drive design in a large organization. You can't earn trust with persuasion. You can't earn trust with creative passion. Henry Ford once said, you can't earn a reputation from things you're going to do. We've got approximately 200 designers all across government now, working in delivery teams, delivering transactions and services all across government. They're in places like Swansea and Bristol, Preston, Newcastle. They're all over the country. This is a picture of our last cross-government design meeting, which was held at the DWP Digital Academy in Leeds. We have this about every 6 months, and we try and get as many people together and catch up on what we're working on. At the front there is Louise Down, who's talking to the group. She'll be taking over from me next month, leading design across government. Her Twitter handle there is at the bottom. She'll do a fantastic job, and I urge you to watch her progress. In agency speak, the job I was doing and the job Lou will be doing, you're acting as an executive creative director. We found that way of working doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work in a federated system all across the country with 200 people and approximately 300 different agencies. This creative director approach doesn't work. The way we solved that was to devolve power down the network and empower the people doing the work, which is exactly the kind of behavior that the internet does. Because too often, the creative director is a bottleneck. You're supposed to sign off work, approve work gets pushed up to you, and that's how you ensure quality. But actually, you just become a bottleneck, and you become a barrier to getting things done. That's what we would call a waterfall process, not an agile process. An agile process is much more flexible and pushes power down into the system. The waterfall process works like that. Waterfall methodology and agile methodology, that's 2 terms taken directly from software. They originate from some of the work Toyota did in modern management in the 70s, but they're very common software terms. For those of you that aren't familiar with modern software management practices, we have this helpful diagram. The one at the top is the waterfall process. And this is for digital services in government, but I think it applies to many other processes and many other organizations and management philosophies. The waterfall approach is there is a problem or someone has an idea, you write a policy that might take 6 months, it might take a year. You write a series of requirements, you go to procurement, that will take a year, that will maybe take 2 years. You build the thing, that's another year, you launch the thing. You're already 3 or 4 years away from where you started. Maybe the problem doesn't exist anymore. Definitely the problem will have changed. Only when you launch do you consider user needs, and often it's too late and they're wrong. Those projects fall over, and we all know what happens. The agile way of working is the one at the bottom, where you'd start with a very small discovery session, maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. You very quickly build alphas and betas, slowly putting more of it public as you get more confidence, but testing it with real users, getting real feedback all the time, and slowly scaling the project up. This is how I think design teams should work. So how do we work at GDS? What's our design process? Well, there's a couple of things that in my time at GDS I've said to other designers and other creative organizations, and it's always struck them as strange. Those are all the designers at GDS can code. The ones that have come in that can't code have taught themselves to code because it's just easier to work in that system if you can code. If you can understand HTML and write a bit, they're not all detailed programmers, but all the designers can code. We have designers from visual backgrounds, from typographic backgrounds, from service design backgrounds, from human interaction backgrounds, but they can all code. Everyone starts by sketching. We don't make any wireframes. We don't make any Photoshop mock-ups. And we're making the thing, not a picture of the thing. So we go from paper and sketch to real code as quickly as we can. And then we test that with real users. We also, just in my team in London, not all the teams across government, in the team in London, I don't sign work off like an executive creative director because we're too agile for that. We make thousands of people publish to gov.uk every day. There are thousands of content changes. But in terms of structural changes or design changes, we make about 8 changes every day. It would be impossible and silly for somebody to sign all of those off. So the teams publish their own work. They decide if it's good to go live, and they publish it. What's happened since we've introduced that system is a peer review system has emerged, where if it's a fairly small change, no one needs to look at it, we've done it before, it's fine, it goes live. If it's slightly more important, the teams will get together themselves and they'll say, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think about that? If it's bigger, they'll come to me, or amongst a group, they'll say, we think we should, maybe talk to Ben about this. That's a proper agile design process. In my experience, very few design teams are agile. Even in the big digital organizations where they're using Agile to do software development, it's rare that they use it for a design process. Not only are we Agile, which is a key behavior of the internet, we're also open. So we don't have any brand guidelines. We don't have a 100-page PDF document that lands on your desk as a designer and the first thing you think is, great, how can I get around this? We have a series of principles and a series of guidelines and code that goes along with it, and they're published. They're published on gov.uk, anyone can see them. And you have to stick to those to pass the service assessment for your site to go live, but they're published and they're open. But we don't just decide those. There's a thing called a hackpad, which is effectively a wiki, and all the designers across government are contributing to those design patterns. They're changing them, they're testing them with user research, they're joining in that conversation, saying maybe this is a better way to do this, or this is how we're doing this in our department. That's what they're doing with alphas and betas. When we get to a state where we think that's working well, that's been tested, that's pretty robust, then we move it into the design elements page. But again, that's a very agile process, and it's a very open design process. This, again, is public. Anyone can look at this. This is super important because openness, in my opinion, is an essential part of leadership now. Lots of ideas and strong leadership is better than one big idea, which is the traditional, it's actually the way creatives are taught. The big idea is everything. And in my opinion, that's wrong, and that's changing. So, to sum up some of the things we've talked about, the design industry has become obsessed with novelty and obsessed with persuasion. The internet is forcing it to change. Design needs to focus on user needs. It can concentrate on fixing the basics. Trust equals delivery. Design should be more agile, and design should be more open. Because usability trumps persuasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I think there's probably many questions for you about lots of the things that you've touched on in your talk. I, in preparation for today, have been keeping an eye on your blog. And in your blog, you've mentioned that quite a big statement, which said that all designers should work in the public sector. You've even said that you wonder if there shouldn't be a design fast stream in the government. So could you expand on that and tell us a little bit more about your thinking behind that?
Yes, certainly. I just think it's a wonderfully enriching experience for people to work in the public sector, and particularly for designers. You learn a different type of skill, you learn a different type of design. Most design jobs now are linked to marketing and all the problems that comes with that. The public sector is very different and has a longer look ahead at things. It's a different type of work. Tim O'Reilly, a famous commentator from Silicon Valley, has a phrase, work on stuff that matters. And it's not just the public sector, there are other things that matter, but that's a really good good place to do that. And it's a great experience. And I think particularly for young designers, if they spent a few years doing that, it would really change their career. And then it naturally follows that if more people did that, and I think we shouldn't hold people to working in the public sector their whole lives. So that naturally follows that something like a graduate, fast-track scheme would be a great way to get designers straight out of college, do a few years in government, maybe work in a digital team or a more traditional team, and then go into industry. I think you would start to change the industry as well. People would start to have slightly different values.
Thank you. I think I'd like to open it to the audience now. There are staff with roving microphones, so if you do have a question, could you please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to come to you? I think the lights will just go on slightly so we can see. Are there any questions? I see one over here.
You talked about openness, Ben. Publishing everything. Obviously, in the public sector, is that slightly easier than the private sector when, competitive landscape rather than the government, not really having any competitors? Just expand on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the honest answer is I don't know. So we haven't done it in the private sector, but I think you're safe to assume it's easier in government. And we've always felt at GDS that gov.uk is a public project done with public money, so you should publish everything, have full transparency. But at the same time, we believe in being open. The best bits of the internet, that's one of the founding principles of the internet, is being open. And we subscribe to that too. I think in a private organisation, obviously it would be slightly different. Having said that, the things like the examples I've showed you there are, font sizes and colours, and I can't see there's any, competitive advantage in keeping those secrets. So I think the privacy thing will be way smaller than you would think it would be, basically. Certainly you should be open by default, and then think about, whether we should stop this or change that. Openness also means just talking about what you're doing, having a culture of blogging, having visible leadership, having leaders that are on Twitter and blogging and talking about what they're doing. It means that as well as publishing everything.
Are there any other questions? Yes, one here.
Hi, Ben. I wondered if there were any circumstances in which your design thinking and approach to Agile jarred with traditional ways of developing projects within the civil service. So the type of processes that have been developed and are overseen by major projects authority or traditional green book type approaches?
Yep. I don't know about jarring. I mean, the major projects authority are a fan of Agile. We've published guidance on that, when to use it, when not to use it, and we've worked with the major projects authority a lot to help them look at projects and judge whether Agile is being used correctly. Agile doesn't work for everything, and it's not the answer to everything. And in fact, many people are too religious about Agile, which is odd, given the name Agile. But many people are too religious about it. So really, Agile works best for projects that are changing quickly and you don't know necessarily what the desired outcome is and you're expecting it to change along the way. Then it works really well because it enables you to change quickly. If you are building something that you've done before and you know what the outcome is and you know how to build it, then you don't need an Agile process to do that. So for example, if you're building a bridge, we know how that works. You can make a reasonable guess for what that's going to cost. You can just get on and do it. And commodities, other things that we would call commodities, you don't need to use Agile to do that. You can just go and do that. But for things that are changing quite quickly, Agile works best.
There's a question here. Yes.
Absolutely agree about putting user needs first. So it's the first principle of inclusive design. But we also know that we live in a very diverse community. And I wonder how you manage to deal with a diverse user need and the conflicts that arise between one individual's needs and another individual's needs. Because another principle of inclusive design is recognising flexibility and adaptability and choice. And some of us using the internet may want a different way of using the information than somebody else.
Yeah, sure. So that's a really important point. And inclusive design and accessibility is really important to us. One of the principles that I showed, we didn't talk about it tonight, but number 7 is design for inclusion. And in there, it talks about accessible design is good design. There's no question in my mind. That's where you start from. If it's not accessible, it's not a successful design. and from day one, we said what we don't want is one of those websites you see that has the thing where you can make the text bigger or you can make the contrast, you can change the contrast to make it more accessible. We don't want the two versions of the site. We'll make one, and we'll make it very good contrast, and we'll make the text larger because we'll make that for everyone. We have a head of accessibility at GDS, and it's a really important role, and it's an important role all across government, basically. How we make sure we are meeting different needs and different people's needs is by user research. So we're constantly doing user research. We're doing it every day all across government, and we're constantly testing that. That's the only way to work out whether we're doing it. And we're doing it with real users. We're not doing it with ourselves, with focus groups. We're out where people are using the site, and we're testing with them.
Excellent. One more question here.
Yeah, sometimes government websites are clunky because the website needs to meet the needs of what is essentially clunky legislation. Maybe the tax system is not a bad example of that. How did, in your situation, how did you deal with the case where the legislation is perhaps old and designed for a paper world?
That's a good question, and far too long for me to answer tonight. It's a whole other talk. We have got examples of that. So lasting power of attorney, one of the transactions that some of you in the audience might have done lasting power of attorney. The one you saw Anne in the video talking about, and universal credit, which is done by DWP. Those are the two examples where the team have brought in the policymakers, in the case of lasting power of attorney, the lawyers, and walked them through the Agile process and shown them prototypes and different software we're making. And you can demonstrate quickly and cheaply, look, we've made a very quick version of this site in weeks, and you can see here how the policy, is clunky and doesn't work. And in those cases, they've gone away and slightly altered the policy, slightly made changes. So it's worked in those cases. We blogged about that on the GDS blog. There's quite a lot of stuff about that you can find. But you really need, one of the other advantages to Agile is you can get everyone in the room at the same time. So you can include a policy person in the team. So rather than being handed down a policy, the policy person is working with you, and they can see very quickly what works and what doesn't, and they can make slight changes.
Yes, there's just a question over here, unfortunately behind the lectern.
Hi.
I'm interested in the question of inclusivity and diversity. How many languages do you publish in?
Mark will tell you that. He's sat on the front row. How many is it, Mark?
I couldn't tell you that.
But
Every embassy we have should publish in the language that is local to that region. We don't publish all content in all languages at the moment, but it's something we're looking at.
Sorry, every what?
So we have content that's published.
So lots is the answer. Most of the content is in English, and we are looking at changing that. Lots of it is in Welsh. All the different embassies, they publish in English and the language in which their country's in. So we have the ability to do that, but the whole site isn't published in many languages yet. But it is something we're working on.
I don't know what they are at the moment, but whether you begin to, say, publish in Arabic.
We tend to find that most people actually prefer it to be. We tend to find a lot of people actually prefer it in English. English is the official language. So interestingly, when we've actually done user research around whether people want to know what languages, we find that the need is a lot less than you might expect. Actually, people prefer English, even if it's their second language.
John's one of our user researchers at GDS. Sorry if you can't hear that, by the way, but yeah.
Yes, there's two questions. First, the one at the back, and then we'll take the second row.
Hi, Ben. Might sound like a silly question, but how do you decide which are the sort of small changes that don't need a lot of governance and decision-making around, and which are the sort of bigger things that need changing? So, for example, you talked about the removing the icons.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, like you say, a big brand, that could be quite a big decision. And it sounded like it was something fairly easy to kind of move on.
How we decide is user research, effectively. Design changes, and we speak about design changes because that's my area. The team decides, and the team should be making that decision based on user research. So if the user research says those icons are useless, get rid of them. and they should be empowered to just do that. If they feel like that's quite a big change and they need to check with me, they should be coming and saying, I think we should get rid of, had a hunch we should get rid of these, we did some user research, they're not doing anything. Then you go, yeah, that's the right decision, let's do it. Pretty much the only thing we wouldn't change on the site is the typeface and the black bar at the top. And that's because that's a key part of the trust, and we need the site to be trusted. And you know, it's what brands were supposed to do when the term was invented, right? But now it's become this odd, twisted marketing term. But we need the trust so people know they're on a government site and know it's the official site and know they can trust it. But apart from that, all the design work is up to change. So it's the team's job to make that decision, really, based on user research. And then it's their job to kind of work out whether they should check with somebody else or push it up to me. And it's really my job to keep an eye on that, and my job to know what they're working on and know whether I should be paying more attention to one thing or the other.
Thank you. Yes, the question here.
Hi, Ben. I'm interested in, so I've been hearing snippets of how you work from various people I know on your team, and I'm interested, as someone who used to design websites back in the day, about your definition of everyone being a designer, which I think is brilliant and quite radical. So my understanding is that you might have someone who identifies as a essentially front-end web designer or graphic designer sitting with a copywriter and looking at a page and redesigning it together.
Yep.
And I wondered if you could expand on that a little bit, because I don't think that happens very much in other situations, in other web design situations.
Good question. Yeah, okay, let me expand on that a little bit. So we have a term in the office which is zero creative overhead, basically, which is about breaking down those barriers and stopping designers being precious. Often designers are the best people to make some of those decisions, but not working on their own and working in isolation. So user research is one example, but a content designer is another thing. The content is the most important thing on the site. It's an information design project, really. And so if the content designer, says this is the bit that's most important, that's a thing we should do. So we try and break down those barriers. And what we don't do is go away, design a thing, make a mock-up of it, then go and show the content designers. We just sit down and do it together. And that has some illuminating effects. One of the exercises we did very early on with Margaret Calvert, in fact it was her idea, was to take various pages we designed on the site and design them in one typeface at one size with no colour, just black and white, no bold, no nothing, just as if you were typing it out. And she said if you do that to pages, you will find the true nature of the content, because too often content is made small or big to hide bad content or bad writing, or there's tricks you can do with design that hide content, and if you if you design it just like that, that flushes it out. So that's just one example of how we would work together.
There was a question over there.
Hi Ben, thank you, and congratulations on everything you've achieved. It's brilliant. One of the phrases I've got two things I want to ask. First of all, one of the phrases you've used a lot is user research, which we hear a lot of it with new projects, but then we don't hear any more, and you're still using it, which I think is really interesting. Yeah. The only other areas I've come across that regularly use user research, which is really sales figures, is FMCG and retail. Yeah. And then if the sales are down, heads roll, not things are adjusted. Yeah. So how are you able... First point is, how are you able to sustain that relationship between design and user research as the work goes on, as it continues? Yep. The other one is, I do know that you've been on planes and trains all over the place to advise other governments now on how to address their public information systems, and I'd be quite interested to have you expand a little bit on that.
Okay. If I take the first one about user research, so we do it all the time. It's really important. In that Agile diagram, you'll see that there isn't a launch. It continues. The circle continues. And that's the same for user research. So you must continue to research your project. You must continue to make changes. If I put screenshots up of the project from, say, 2 years ago and work through that, you would see tiny little changes all the time. You may not notice like a big shift, but you'll see tiny tweaks that are being done all the time. I think user research has a bad reputation in the creative industries, and I think that's mostly because they've worked with bad user researchers. We have some fantastic user researchers at GDS, and Lisa Reichelt, who set that kind of profession up within GDS and within government, has done a fantastic job of showing us real user research and what it's really like and how powerful it can be and how it can help your design work. And without it, you're designing blind, really. All the designers know that's important. It's actually written into their objectives that they must go to user research and they must include user research in their work. So it's really important for us, and we do it constantly on a constant loop. The other question is, yes, lots of governments have seen what we're doing and have set up similar things. So America have a US digital service, which launched last year, and Obama announced a couple of weeks ago they've just hired 500 people from Google to come and work with them. And the big tipping point for them was healthcare.gov. That was their big burning platform, and that's when they realised something needed to be done, and they looked to the UK and they said, okay, we'll set that up. New Zealand have done a similar thing. Italy have done a similar thing. The other one that's really only got going a few months ago is in Australia, where they have set up a digital transformation office, again modelled on us, modelled on our structure, and championed by Malcolm Turnbull, who was Minister at the time and is now Prime Minister. So this is really gathering steam, I think, across the globe. And this is where the openness really helps, because most of these governments are based on a British system somehow, and most of them have the same type of transactions and the same type of policies and systems, and they can just take our code and use it. They can just take the code and reuse it for their systems. Mexico are doing a similar thing. The best government in the world at this are Estonia. Estonia are way ahead of everyone, and I encourage you to look at them. That's partly because they're a relatively new government and they had very little legacy, and also because when they started they had zero money. So the only way to deliver services with zero money is on the internet, but they're the best.
Are there any final questions? Yes, one over here.
It's just a small question. Have you ever, at the beginning especially, have any annoying MPs trying to tell you what to do?
No. No, we didn't. And in fact, we were welcomed into the civil service by civil servants and by politicians with open arms. Everyone recognised that we weren't doing this as well as we could, and they needed, help to do it. But I think it's really important that at the start of the project, people like me I'm a civil servant. We're not contractors. We haven't kind of come in. We were actually civil servants and said, look, we're here for the long term. We're here to help fix this. So.
There's one more. Okay. Yes, if you just wait for the microphone.
Hi. I was wondering, you said that UX is responsibility of everyone. And how do you set up a team culture where everyone is on board with that, and where you have designers with no egos and, I guess, developers who feel responsible for something beyond the code itself?
Sure. I mean, there are lots of ways you can do that. You need to create a culture of that. We need to break UX out of the silo that it's bizarrely put itself in. We have lots of people at GDS on the design team that would have called themselves UX designers before, and probably when I'm out of the room still call themselves that. But generally speaking, we force people to choose between user research and design. So there's a user research team and there's a design team, and they work incredibly closely together. But we break those silos, and then they work in a team with developers. They sit next to developers. They may do some light coding, but the production code is done by developers. So people work together that way. And then we just have this principle that user experience is the whole thing. If the servers are really slow, the user experience is bad. That's not a design problem. That's either about someone fixing something on the servers, or more likely someone going and fixing a contract somewhere, or moving the hosting. And that, once you understand that can't be done by a UXer or a UX team. That's got to be a bigger thing. Really, the CEO, if you like, is the ultimate person in charge of user experience. But UX for me is problematic because it gets used as a noun. And it's too easy, as I said, it's too easy in big projects where there's lots of procurement involved for somebody to say, oh, we can just buy some UX. So that's why we go on all the time about no, user experience is the responsibility of everyone.
So getting everyone into research helps.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. Getting everyone into research really helps. I mean, when research is done properly, you can't hide from it. So we get as many people as we can along to that, including politicians, including ministers. And if we can't, we video it and we show people and we say, this is what it's really like.
Oh, one more question. Yes. Please wait for the microphone. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. It was wonderful. Do you think your team will ever get the chance to design a digital referendum system?
No idea. Absolutely no idea. I don't.
So on that note, I think, so we know research and coding. Those two things to take away from this. I'm pleased to say that we can continue the discussion downstairs to celebrate the launch of the Student Design Awards, and Ben being here tonight, 18 years later. We are having a reception downstairs, so please enjoy a glass of wine or beer and some snacks downstairs in the Benjamin Franklin room. But for now, please join me in thanking our excellent speaker, Ben Terrett.